Hey everybody, it's me again, and I'm sure this is something that most of you have been waiting for, and this was a review I held back on because in all honesty, I've never seen anything like this. I'm not talking about the movie itself. That will be for another subject. But the making of this movie, the making of the Snow White remake in 2025. Of all the Disney remakes that existed in the universe, I've never seen one hit with so much controversies as the Snow White remake. I mean, even the Little Mermaid remake did not have this many problems as this new remake. I mean, the controversies came mainly down to the race swapping of the main character, the unpleasant CGI of the side characters, and the trimming down of two iconic songs. But personally, I still don't think that movie was that bad. I mean, I still think that what Disney did with Kiss the Girl, I was more winking at the audience than it was actually telling a story. So that was not good on Disney's part. And Flounder, he was the worst looking CGI character out of everybody. And I don't know, do more people talk about this? The fact that I think Javier Bardem needed a take two in his acting as King Triton. But otherwise, I genuinely enjoyed that movie. I thought Halle Bailey captured the spirit of the character, and you could clearly see the passion in her performance. When Snow White was announced for a remake, I was cautiously optimistic. I didn't think we needed another Snow White remake. Oh, not because of Disney, but because we've already had way too many Snow White remakes, two of which came out in the same year, Mirror Mirror and The Huntsman. Well, Snow White and the Huntsman, of course, starring, well, the one person I think is a worst casting choice, Kristen Stewart. Not that she can't act, I will acknowledge that, but man, did that movie come out at such a bad time. But back to the subject. However, if they had the right casting, kept true to the spirit of the tale, told a good story, then it could work. Maybe not entirely go the same route as the 1937 version, since, well, there are some scenes that won't ever look fun or funny in live action. Case in point, something like the dwarves washing up or the queen's transformation. None of those scenes will ever look as impressive, scary, or funny as it can in a cartoon, unless you've got some really convincing makeup or have some very funny comedic actors pulling them off. However, one thing after another took it down, from the castings to the interviews to leaked photos to Twitter, and I'm going to say Twitter because I like the name better than I do X, to Disney almost being ashamed of itself for for the 1937 movie and trying desperately to cover up all their mistakes for both that movie and this one. On Facebook, it also seemed as though nobody was allowed to like this movie and nobody was allowed to dislike it either. If you liked this movie, you were called a shill, you were called trash, you were laughed at, and you were mistreated, even when you were genuine about it. If you disliked this movie, whether you were genuine or not, you were called racist, you were called a bigot, you were laughed at, you were also mistreated. Even The Little Mermaid did not have this much animosity. There were so many people who laughed at you for liking it, but you were still allowed to dislike it. Snow White, you could not win in either. I know because I did both. I first supported it, but when the interviews got worse and I saw both Disney and the star cast member and what they were doing, I began to dislike it and endured insults on both sides. In this video, I'm going to talk about the controversies surrounding this movie, and in part two, I will talk about what I thought about the movie itself. Why a part one and a part two? Because, good grief. There's just so much to talk about with both subjects, so this is part one. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. So let's start with the idea of remaking Snow White. Ever since the 2019 Lion King, audiences for remakes were going down a bit more. People got irritated with this particular movie for copying and pasting about 95% of the original movie and expanding on pointless moments, and especially for trying to fix what isn't broke. The original movie was close to perfect, and people were asking themselves, why are we watching this when the original was done so much better? As well as wondering if Disney would even try to remake or even fix some of their not-so-popular movies like Atlantis, Sword in the Stone, or especially The Black Cauldron. I even rooted for a Home on the Range remake, or better yet, a retelling of it. And for most fans of either of those movies, to remake it would have been more ideal. But Disney seemed more interested in the popular movies like Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, Jungle Book, Dumbo, and so on. Whether the reason being for money, nostalgia, money, and more money, you get the point. Then the virus hit, movies weren't in theaters anymore, and had to go straight to streaming, including their expensive remake Mulan, and you had to pay $30 in order to watch it. Needless to say, it mostly did not do well with audiences or critics due to story choices and an emotionless main actress. When the Snow White remake was announced, after The Little Mermaid, audiences went berserk. This was Walt Disney's greatest achievement, becoming the first animated movie and his biggest gamble. And I do mean his biggest gamble. If this movie failed, it would cost him everything. And yes, I do mean everything. The budget was a 1.5 million. Walt Disney had to mortgage his house to finance the movie, took out a $250,000 loan. His wife and his brother tried to talk him out of making this movie, but he didn't listen to them. And everybody was referring this as Disney's folly. Fortunately, it triumphed, earning him about $7,846,000 in the international box office by the end of its original theatrical run. People loved it for the ambition, the animation, most of the characters, and the heart and the passion for what was felt in the story. So the idea of remaking this was almost sacrilege. Fans began joking among themselves how the studio would ruin the character. Walt Disney, you could say, somewhat created or even adapted, take your pick of words. But I don't think anyone could have ever guessed how the studio in the 2020s would do it, other than maybe the first point. The casting. This is where it mostly began. The castings was where everyone got riled up in one form or another. Starting with Rachel Zegler. Both according to the Brothers Grimm 1812 story and the animated 1937 movie, Snow White was named due to her mother wishing for a daughter with lips as red as blood, skin as white as snow, and hair as black as ebony. When Rachel Zegler was cast, people pointed out that she was Colombian and not white. Personally, I originally didn't mind since I knew she could sing and act, and her breakout role in West Side Story made her look phenomenal. However, I could understand why people were sick and tired of this kind of casting. For some, they cared about what the story meant to them. For others, they wanted They wanted Columbia to tell their own story and not make Americans rely on familiar stories for diversity, somewhat like what Coco did, or what Princess and the Frog did by putting their own spin on the story, and telling it in a unique way, making it count without shoehorning in people that look nothing like the character. So I get that. Other times, yes, other times there were racism involved, but again, it always depended on who the person was, who was making the complaints. But I was all for giving her a chance and cheering her on. She had that great talent, and well, if you were to ask me between Rachel Zegler and Kristen Stewart, I'm sorry, I would go for Rachel Zegler because she can sing, she can act, two things that are not easy. And again, I know Kristen Stewart can act if she's given the right direction. But man, was she not given the right direction for that year and for a while. So, yeah, that was my 2 cents on her. Okay, how about Gal Gadot? People were unhappy with this casting choice for, well, a variety of reasons. The first one was politically motivated. But the bigger reason being, Gal Gadot is more attractive than Rachel Zegler, therefore a miscast. But this was something I also defended. Yes, Gal Gadot is a knockout compared to Rachel Zegler. I mean, yeah, Rachel Zegler is pretty. She's very pretty. But you put the two together in the same room, who are you gonna think is more attractive? But I still defended this casting choice because, well, for one, Gal Gadot looks and behaves like royalty. 2, and this is kind of an unpopular opinion, I always thought that in most incarnations of the Snow White story, the evil queen was more attractive than Snow White. Yeah, even the animated one, I thought she was more stylish, more pretty, and come on, Once Upon a Time. The Once Upon a Time show, are you really going to tell me that Snow White is prettier than Lana? Really? Jennifer Goodwin is pretty, but not as pretty as Lana. And Snow White and the Huntsman, give me a break. Charlize Theron versus Kristen Stewart. You know who's going to look prettier. I think the only incarnations that I recall getting, well, Snow White to be prettier than the evil queen was Mirror, Mirror, and the 2001 Snow White Fairest of Them All, where Snow White in there was a lot prettier than the evil queen. My personal opinion. If you guys disagree, okay. Did you think that Kristen Stewart was prettier than Charlize Theron? Okay. But also, another reason I defended this casting choice is because, well, if you think about it from the Brothers Grimm version, it describes the queen to be beautiful, very beautiful, but vain and black of heart. So I thought, okay, this could be fitting. And I was certain that she could work with it. How she ultimately did, we'll discuss in part 2. So, not just yet. Now on to the Rhapsody Street Kids. The 7 CGI abominations. The dwarfs. Oh, this one. Forget the main casting choices. This was the casting choice that got under my skin. One thing I was looking forward to with this movie was, who are they going to get for the dwarves? And it seems like Disney would actually get little people for this role, as is traditionally done. Then in 2022, Peter Dinklage, who has dwarfism and played roles like this lots of times in Narnia and Game of Thrones and in Elf, I said on the podcast, you're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of the 7 dwarves living in the cave. What the are you doing, man? Have I done nothing to advance the cause from my soapbox? I guess I'm not loud enough. Dinklage added that it had a that it was cool to have a progressive spin on the fairy tale, and he would have been all in. And about 48 hours later, Disney responded saying, to avoid reinforcing stereotypes from the original animated movie, we are taking a different approach with these 7 characters and have been consulting with members of the dwarfism community. We look forward to sharing more as the film heads into production after a lengthy development period. And frankly, after after so much of what I've seen, after so much of the pictures and the news updates, I do not believe that they consulted with the dwarfism community at all. Or even if they did, maybe 1 or 2 words. But either way, I don't believe it because October 27th was when the first picture of the 7 bandits was streamed on the web, and people were rightfully outraged about this. They were asking, are these supposed to be the 7 dwarves? Because they are clearly 7 people, all different height and gender, and only one short token person. Fans cried out to Disney for wanting to not enforce stereotypes, and that this is their way of doing it. And in avoiding those stereotypes, they took away 7 jobs from 7 little people, or, well, I guess I should say 6, but still, they took it away from so many people who would want recognition, including any actors with dwarfism, like Dylan Postel, called Disney out for this. TikToker Pete Montezingo also called them out for taking jobs away from little people, including his brother. That same day, of course, photos did leak of the 7 CGI garbage pail kids. I mean, not dwarfs. And no, I am not calling those creatures dwarves because they don't want to, clearly. And they look awful. And those pictures looked awful of the supposedly 7 magical creatures that were still trying to resemble the dwarfs from the 1937 movie with the same names and same features. But yeah, it still did not quell the fury that everybody had. They were all angry. I mean, people were very angry with Disney for going out of its way to avoid casting 7 actual people with dwarfism on screen, just keeping one person behind the screen as Grumpy. Yeah, behind the scenes, they've only got one actor with actual dwarfism voicing Grumpy. Everybody else is voiced of every different height. And on top of that, the characters you see on screen are all CGI and not real. What does that say about it? And hey, don't just take my word for it. Dylan Postel with dwarfism pretty much said in an interview, it's not about stereotypes. This is about roles that were made for people such as my stature that don't have the chance to go for other roles normal. Lilia Hart, also with dwarfism. It's very disappointing that Snow White chose not to include us, especially when they're trying to say that this movie is supposed to be woke and different. It's almost like they're saying to be a little person is bad, so that's why we had to make them a cartoon. It could have been created more opportunities for other people. I will say though, if I am playing devil's advocate, I'll say that at best, Peter Dinklage probably didn't know that Disney would twist his advice. He probably didn't even mean for 7 jobs to be taken away by CGI. He probably just wanted to give people with dwarfism better roles and have their statuses raised, which I get. If he did mean to diminish those jobs for people in the dwarfism community, then what the heck, Peter? This isn't progression, it's regression. And enforcing the idea that actors with dwarfism can't work, which is frankly a more harmful message. I never saw dwarfs. On a personal level, I never saw the dwarfs in Snow White as backwards. I related to them for different reasons. My sisters and I would name which ones we were. They were more interesting than Snow White, and frankly, the best part. And they cared about her. They protected her. They fought for her. And heck, let's look back at another live-action Snow White, okay? Shall we? Snow White, fairest of them all, which I recommend for everybody. It's free on YouTube if you want to check it out. Caroline Thompson made sure that each of the actors was treated accordingly and or was treated well, and wrote these characters using each of their personality traits, especially when it came to the dwarves. Michael J. Anderson, who played the character Sunday, absolutely loved his character, identified with him, and thought of him as a philosopher of the group. Warwick Davis had fun playing Saturday. And yes, those dwarves are the days of the week. And while Wednesday technically wasn't a dwarf, but miserably thought of himself as one, he was treated as a member of the group and did not overshadow the actual dwarves. All of them were well-written characters for the most part. Caroline Thompson took time to flesh out these dwarves. Maybe not succeed in all of them because, well, Thursday, Friday, and Tuesday kinda didn't get too much development, but then again, there's so many characters to work on, so I get it. But the ones that did matter the most, she would give them focused on, whether it be Sunday, Wednesday, or Saturday, you name it. This movie for Disney should have been a chance for newcomers. But Disney neglected it and went the way of Pan 2015, where they thought avoiding the casting would make things better, but really it made things worse. And the CGI on those not dwarves is a crime. Really a crime. This was animated by this was animated by several different motion picture companies. 4 of them, I can name their works. One of them being Moving Picture Company. What were they known for? They were known for the Harry Potter movies, The Jungle Book 2016, Lion King 2019, the Sonic trilogy. But also was sadly part of the Cats 2019 production, and you could clearly see that there. Framestone did Avatar 2009, the Paddington movies, the How to Train Your Dragon remake, the Barbie movie, Wicked, and Guardians of the Galaxy. Passion Pictures was commercial and animation output like Cartoon Network. And Lola Effects is computer graphics on live-action movies like Pixels, Beauty and the Beast remake, Black Panther, Ant-Man, the Twilight Saga, sadly, and also worked on the Avatar 2009 movie. I sincerely don't know if this is a case of too many cooks spoil the broth, or if the producer/director abused them the same way that Tom Hooper did for Cats, or if this was just a case of laziness because these characters are ugly, unpleasant, and were one of many reasons I did not go to see this in theaters. And I truly hope this movie was not in 3D. It truly should not have been in 3D. If it was, then my sincerest apologies to everybody who had to endure seeing that in 3D. Because, oh, that looked so bad. And now on to the interview / Zegler's behavior. After people saw the interview in 2023, the controversy became less about Rachel Zegler's race and more about her behavior. In 2023, both Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot went out to promote this movie, and Zegler was giving these comments. Things like, I mean, it's no longer 1937. She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming of true love. She's dreaming about becoming the ruler her late father knew she could be. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and evidently so there's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird, weird. So we didn't do that this time. We have a different approach to what I'm sure people will assume is a love story, just because we cast a guy in there. Andrew Burnham, great dude. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. It's Hollywood, baby. I will say, if I am playing devil's advocate, I can't tell if she was making jokes or not, but it really didn't work out. Her facial expressions seemed smug, and especially when talking about this new version, how it wouldn't focus on the stalker love story. On Entertainment Weekly, she was asked, she and Gal Gadot were asked, what drew you to the material? Gal Gadot answered that it was for how iconic it was and the honor of being part of it and how fun it was. For Rachel Zegler, she admitted she had no idea what she was auditioning for. Then when it's made clear, she says, I will elbow everyone out of the way for this. So, for that one, I did give this theory with my older sister that after West Side Story, studios were probably milking her, the same way they did for Judy Garland when they found out what she was great at. They found what Rachel Zegler was great at, and they probably were milking her. And saying, okay, we're going to give her this part, we're going to give her that part. Maybe that theory is wrong. Feel free to correct me. I'm up for corrections. And, back to the interviews. Another thing that Zegler had also said, I was scared of the original cartoon. I watched it once, then I never picked it up again. I watched it once and then went on the ride in Disney World called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a kid would like. I was terrified of it. Never revisited Snow White again. So I watched it probably for the first time in 17 years when I did this film. I won't be too harsh on this interview because, let's be fair. Even though from a business standpoint it is very foolish, it is relatable. Snow White both delighted and scared me as a kid, and the ride definitely scared me. So this one I will sympathize with. Gal Gadot, meantime, was still singing praises of both movies and of Rachel. And right after Gal finished talking about Sandy Powell's costuming and what a great job she was doing, Rachel said, the reality is the cartoon was made 85 years ago and therefore is extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power and what a woman is fit for in the world. And so when we came to reimagine the actual role for Snow White, it became about the fairest of them all, meaning who is the most just and who could become the most fantastic leader. And the reality is Snow White has a lot to learn, a lot of lessons to coming out into her own power before she can come into power over her kingdom. And the reactions to each of those interviews was ugly. And that's just saying it nicely. Disney was most definitely not happy with what Rachel Zegler said. And the son of the director from the original 1937 movie basically called the new movie disrespectful of his father's legacy. And upon hearing what Disney had in store for Snow White, many people were very outraged, and especially the conservative Daily Wire. And to counter what Disney was doing, they filmed their version of Snow White starring Brett Cooper, hoping to show what the story of Snow White was really about. And hoping to show at the same time that Disney premiered theirs, just to embarrass them at the box office. Unfortunately, after Cooper dropped out, the project was scrapped. I don't know if it will reemerge again or not, but for right now, it's gone. But in all reality, I don't think that the Daily Wire I needed to push for Disney to lose or anything, because Disney was doing it all by themselves this time. And Disney was not happy with what Rachel Zegler said in the interviews. So during the next interview in December 7th, 2023, they had her and Halle Bailey from The Little Mermaid sit across from each other at Variety, and you could clearly see the differences between that interview and the previous interview, where Zegler's behavior was mostly softer than the previous interview, and she was very friendly with Bailey, who was with the sole goal of supporting Zegler as Snow White. And Zegler was a lot nicer about Snow White, the original movie, and respectful of it, causing people to speculate whether or not she had been intensely schooled after the last interview. And that was just the beginning of Disney's damage control. Now we're going to jump to August 2023, the writer's strike. She joined the writer's strike in Times Square. If you want to know more about the writer's strike in general, you can look it up, because I'm not going to delve into too much detail about that. However, she filmed herself on TikTok and supporting them in Times Square, and suddenly said, "If I'm going to stand there in 18 hours a day in the dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online." She is just one of many stars who has touched on the issues of fair pay during the summer, increasingly so doing so with the aid of the internet. And, well, this strike was one of many reasons that the movie was pushed back from March 22nd, 2024 to March 21st, 2025. So, yeah, this was getting a huge pushback from the writer's strike, but there likely was also more going on. So, and we're going to jump to the next one. August 10th, 2024 is when the first trailer finally released. Unlike the Little Mermaid teaser, the comments were not turned off, and nobody held back. Everybody was saying things like, "I'm rooting for the poison apple. Why is Lord Farquaad playing Snow White? If I saw this movie on a plane, I would still walk out." Or, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the bravest of them all? Disney for putting on the comments." And it got to a point where even chat music, I took all the comments that they thought were the funniest and turned them into 4 sets of songs, titling them "Mirror, Mirror on the Wall." I'll leave a link in the low. I'll leave a link below for you to look at least the first one. Along with that, groups like Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions, Boycott, Divestments, and Sanctions, as well as the Palestinian Campaign for Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel, all called for a boycott of this movie due to Gal Gadot's past services in the IDF, as well as the fact that she was in it. 2 days later, Rachel Zegler posted the teaser on her Twitter page with the comment, "I love you all so much. Thank you for the love and the 120 million views on our trailer in 24 hours. What a whirlwind! I am in the thick of rehearsals for Romeo and Juliet, so I'm going to get out of here. Bye for now. Then immediately tagged that too, and always remember, free Palestine. I'm just going to say that again. She added, while tagged to the Walt Disney trailer, free Palestine. And for anybody wondering, Gal Gadot did not directly respond to her advocacy, but remained a professional distance. According to Variety, thanks to this tweet, Gal Gadot received death threats, leading Disney to hire extra security for her. And yes, yes, Gal Gadot was also vocal, except for Israel, whereas Zegler was for Palestine. But unlike Zegler, she did not tag supporting Israel onto any of her movie trailers, but talked about it in her free time, supported it in her free time. This just almost seemed like a stunt or a jab at her co-star. Rumors have circulated on the fact that both of them have been feuding even before this Twitter post. I cannot confirm that, so I'll let you guys confirm whether or not that's true. But yeah, this Twitter post harmed a lot for both Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler. Because from then on, following the following interviews began to expose the cracks between Gadot and Zegler. Before then, they seemed to support each other, or at least Gal Gadot was singing Zegler's praises and treating her like she's the absolute star of the show. She's the greatest thing in the world, and that this movie's going to be great. This is going to be a lot of fun. But the more the interviews kept up, after this Twitter post, the less she tried to be anywhere in the same vicinity as Rachel Zegler, and vice versa. In fact, they barely interacted with one another. And Gal Gadot would press forward with what was expected of her, and Zegler just didn't look like she was trying to hide it that much, or at least not that well. And if you look at the 2025 Oscars, the feud was loud and clear for everyone to see. They wouldn't even look at each other on stage, and they angled themselves away from each other. Even experts about body language were saying, "Oh yeah, they don't like each other. They were not looking at each other. They weren't acknowledging each other. They were just angling themselves away from each other." Then, of course, came the election of 2024, where it was Harris versus Trump. She did not, on TikTok, Rachel Zegler did not just urge people to vote for Harris, but straight up ordered it, declaring that it wasn't an option because our rights are on the line, she said. And if you disagree with this sentiment, just hit the unfollow button. I don't need your business, was also what she added. After Trump won the election, winning over half the country, she posted on Instagram, "I find myself speechless in the midst of this. Another 4 years of hatred, leaning us towards a world I do not want to live in. Leaning us towards a world that will be hard to raise my daughter in." That is, if she had one. Leaning us towards a world that will force her to have a baby when she doesn't want to. Leaning us towards a world that is fearful. I shouldn't be this shocked, but I am. I am heartbroken for my friends who awoke with fear this morning. I am here with you to cry, to yell, to hug, to wax poetic on how the left continues to fail us in forging a new path forward. This loss should not have been, and certainly should not have been by so many votes. I echo Ethel Kane's statement. More than anything, may Trump supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself never know peace. Shortly after she posted that, executives called her to basically say, "What the heck, Rachel? Over half of our country is supposed to watch this movie, and you just cursed them." And shortly after that was posted, shortly after that happened, the post was taken down and replaced with, "Hi everyone, I would like to sincerely apologize for the election post I shared on my Instagram last week. I let my emotions get the best of me. Hatred and anger have caused us to move further and further away from peace and understanding, and I am sorry I contributed to the negative discourse. This week has been emotional for so many of us, but I firmly believe that everyone has the right to their opinion, even when it differs from my own. I am committed to contributing positively towards a better tomorrow." But basically, people looked at these two posts and saw the difference immediately. I causing them to wonder if Disney executives wrote this for her and ordered her to copy and paste it onto her Instagram. And originally, I didn't want to believe it, but after looking at the way that it's written and the way her original post was written, I can actually see that. Why? Because the apology was grammatically polished, which doesn't often happen on the net, unless there was somebody who truly cared enough to to focus on everything. And on top of that, it's more thought out compared to her original post. And her original post had no capitals. I mean, it had periods, but no capitals, no filters. And yeah, leading the theory that executives wrote this apology for her to be sound of fact. And I'd say it's very founded. And Disney did this to save face and win audiences, but it didn't. It didn't win audiences. People saw what was going on and they called it out for what it was. And from there on out, the damage control was on full hiatus, and it was hard for me to watch it, frankly. They had the trailer comparisons. Disney originally started out their trailer showing how different their Snow White is, and that it's going to be something new, original, perhaps. But then their trailer started dropping out, showing that, oh yeah, we are very similar to the original story. They even had Zegler saying how similar this movie is to the original movie. Yeah, after trashing the original, yeah, people are totally going to buy that. I mean, Disney fans are a lot smarter than that. And the Super Bowl spot that Rachel Zegler's trailer was supposed to have got canceled. And instead showed Stitch, who's also going to get a live-action reboot sometime this month. It showed a funny commercial with Stitch instead of the Snow White trailer that was supposed to be there. The Oscar number that Rachel Zegler was supposed to have also got canceled. She was supposed to sing "Whistle While You Work" in her dress and with CGI characters in the background, but that got scrapped down to just her and Gal Gadot presenting the Oscar for Best Visual Effects. And I've already described what happened in there, that they wouldn't even look at each other. Also, nobody was allowed to criticize Rachel Zegler, not even Ariana DeBose, who worked with her in West Side Story. And when allegations of Rachel's past behavior kept coming up, Disney would silence them. And then the worst part was the red carpet. The red carpet got minimized, and the UK premiere was scrapped altogether to, quote-unquote, avoid anti-woke backlash, which was absolutely unheard of from Disney. They had never done that before, not even with The Little Mermaid. I had to look that up to I check and see, did they do that with The Little Mermaid? Because The Little Mermaid was also under fire. Maybe not this much fire, but they were under fire from quote-unquote anti-woke, a backlash. But they premiered in the UK with all the stars interacting with each other, interacting with their fans, and Jodie Benson being part of it too. So, yeah, the fact that they scrapped their London premiere and even minimized the red carpet to a point where they even selected who could watch the movie at the premiere, whether it be kids or certain select interviewers and certain select photographers. And Zegler and Gal Gadot were kept apart for most of it. In order to promote the movie, Zegler was sent to Geneva, Spain, for the premiere. Gal Gadot was sent to Los Angeles, California, for the premiere. And the two did show up at the red carpet, but they were mostly kept a distance. Because their feud was really not being well hidden anymore. And people could see that. It was really the first time Disney was acting ashamed of its own project and, well, just ripping the Band-Aid off as quickly as they could to get this over with so that they could get Lilo and Stitch to come in. And rip the Band-Aid off they did, because here comes the release and the impact. People did indeed show up. And yes, Rachel Zegler was right about that. People did show up, whether it was to criticize it, to enjoy it, to rip it to shreds afterwards, satisfy their curiosity or support her, you name it. However, people also boycotted this movie for personal, political, etc. reasons. It was really bad. And people were filming themselves walking into empty theaters for this movie, or very few minimum people. And Rachel Zegler even filmed herself in a mostly empty theater and cheering herself on. And it just didn't look good for Disney. And recently, May 9th, the 9th through the 11th, it was re-released in 1,000 US theaters, which was very short-lived, earning only $335,000 over the weekend. Typically, a Disney movie would earn a lot more than that, and even the opening box office was an embarrassment for Disney. The budget for the movie had ranged between $240 million to $270 million. And at the box office worldwide, it ultimately closed with $202.8 million worldwide. Not even close. And it was a very painful defeat for Disney. And the impact of it was really bad for everybody. Rachel Zegler eventually went to Dubai, possibly to get away from the fact that Disney was demanding $120 million in repayment. They canceled projects with her, including Toy Story 5, Pirates of the Caribbean 6. Though, I don't know, maybe canceling Pirates of the Caribbean 6 is probably a better idea, because you can't make it without Johnny Depp, but I digress. And as for Disney itself, the company, it suffered financial loss from reshoots, cover-ups, listening to everybody and nobody at the same time. And due to the horrible performance of this movie, they dropped their plans for a live-action Tangled. It was also supposed to not come onto streaming until mid-June to July, but due to the backlash, Disney put it up on the streaming for May 13th. At the current moment that I'm making this video, the DVD sales are still not until June. So yeah, it was really bad for Disney. So now I'm just going to conclude this. What are my overall thoughts on these controversies? I gave it the benefit of the doubt. I genuinely enjoyed The Little Mermaid for what it was, the passion the main actress put into it, the songs, the story, and a few new elements that actually did add to the story, like the expanded romance between Ariel and Eric. This, however, Snow White, is a snowstorm Disney created out of a meaningful project that was hard and painful to look at, to a point where all I could shout was, "You had one job, Disney, and you ruined it." Taking Rachel Zegler's bad behavior into account, was she responsible? For her own actions, yes. It was inappropriate of her to drag the Middle Eastern conflict into the Disney trailer, publicly jab at her Israeli co-star, and potentially put her in danger. Though, at best, I hope that was unintentional. Allowing the internet to get even more anti-Semitic with Disney followers like me. And by the way, Anna Matt, that joke you made about Gal Gadot was very racist. Wishing ill on thousands of people for their political views rather than be an example for peace, which I understand isn't easy, but it is needed. And you can't achieve that without Jesus. And that had me wonder, why did she audition for Snow White if she didn't like the story? I mean, again, was she being milked into the project? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have heard that Renetta Vaca, maybe I'm saying it wrong, who lost the role to Zegler. I wonder if she would have done better or not. I mean, she could clearly sing. I've never seen her act, but apparently she can. You guys tell me. But I get why people might not like the 1937 movie. I've heard people online call it dated or boring, both of which I disagree with. But I still understand why people call it that. Everybody has a view on a movie, which kudos for them. However, when you are starring in it, the best you could do is be honest about the project you're doing and not criticize the original movie for all the passion that was poured into it. At best, Rachel probably did not understand what Walt Disney poured and put on the line for this movie to happen. She doesn't have to love it either. But she just needed to do what Halle Bailey did when she played Ariel. Let her own work speak for itself. That's the best that you could ever do as an actress for a project that you're in, whether you like it or not. You could express the truth about it, but you got to be careful about it as well. However, Disney is also responsible for covering themselves. In many ways, Rachel Zegler exposed to the media what the writers and producers were doing, which is act ashamed of the original classic. And everything that seemed to be problematic and acting above it all rather than than telling a story. And that's what this movie has become to so many people, a soapbox instead of a coherent story. When it tried to backtrack in the trailers, saying, "We are the same as the original movie," fans recognized being lied to. It was also the first time I personally felt betrayed by the industry. In little to no ways was this movie the same as the original 1937, and I knew it couldn't be, since, again, some scenes cannot be made as funny or as awesome as it can in animation. And in live action, it would look awkward at best. But I was still willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. All it had to do was be a good movie. It just needed a good story. Disney failed to do that. It became all the ideologies in politics, taking life literally, unearned girl power promotion, and hypocrisy in what groups of people could be progressed and which ones couldn't. On top of that, instead of owning up to their mistakes on the project, they um, they blamed critics. They blamed haters that they made up in their minds, even though admittedly there are some people who truly were deserving of that title. But people who were pointing out valid criticisms as well were being labeled as haters, and then they sue Rachel Zegler. For to make up for their losses. However, everyone saw that the criticisms were no longer about Zegler's heritage, but rather about hers and Disney's bad behavior. All of this combined killed my ambition to see this movie. I was going to go see it. I was excited. I wanted to go see this at my local theater. Cosplayed as Snow White and everything. I even put up a poll on Facebook asking, should I sound like myself or should I go sounding like the original Snow White? And people voted I go sound like the original Snow White, which I could, by the way, do. But I'm not going to do right here, right now. But yeah, I wanted to give this movie a chance and have fun with it. Bring some fun to it. But all of this killed it. This entire tornado had killed my ambition to see this. I instead decided to wait until after it streamed online in case I needed to pause and process everything. How did I feel about the movie? Well, let's find out in part 2 and see if the controversy actually did kill the movie for me altogether, or if the movie was better than I thought. So join me for part 2 for next time. Till then, see you later.